There we go. Okay, thanks everyone. My name's Mike. I am the CEO of 3Pillars Project. 3Pillars Project started back in 2015. We were very lucky actually today to be joined by Parry Kane, who was there when it started. I was volunteering in Felton Young Offenders Institute on a rugby program, and I immediately recognised that sport and rugby were a fantastic way to engage young people in criminal justice system, particularly in Felton. But what I thought was there was a real opportunity to create a more integrated model between sport, ongoing mentoring, and then through the gate support into the community. And I think the past 5 years, the journey from that fledgling idea for 3Pillars Project through to today has really proven that. And I guess that's kind of based off 3 principles, specifically looking at criminal justice system. So firstly, sport is a fantastic way to build relationships with young people. It's not the be all and end all, but it's a really good way to develop that hook, they call it, and to be the vehicle for building a relationship. Many young people that enter custody, certainly as teenagers, have experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences, and actually the way to help them beyond those experiences and to develop in the future is by building meaningful, positive relationships, and sport is the vehicle to do that. The second observation is with criminal justice, we really need to improve through the gate support for people. So recognizing that when people are in custody, we have a real opportunity to build a relationship, but then moving into that release and that post-release stage can be a really unstable situation, and actually one that's filled with a lot of uncertainty. So we have an opportunity to really help people to settle and reintegrate into the community positively. But then the third point is, what is that ongoing support? And I think certainly with a couple of cases of guys that we've worked with, the longer term the support can be, the more positive it will be. So the best cases, most positive examples we've had are where we've been engaging and working with people for 3 to 4 years. And actually that takes an awful amount of energy and commitment, but also that long-term support really does yield positive results. And the end state being that we end up with young men that are released from custody that enter a community where they can not only receive from the community that supports them, but they can contribute back to their community, whether that means mentoring other young people in the community, running sports organizations, working for charities. The end state that we want for young men coming out of the criminal justice system is actually to turn 180 and be positive contributors to their community. So just kind of bear those 3 things with us. That's really central to 3Pillars. So building relationship through sport, building relationship before people are released and beyond release, and then long-term commitment and dedication to someone's development. Now we've got a short video, and that's 3 pillars in the main. We'll move on, Tom. So we've got a short video in the moment, but what we're currently planning with 3Pillars at the moment is a program and intervention called Game Plan. Now, Game Plan is going to draw on everything that we've learned over the past 5.5 years, and it's going to be a multi-stage approach linked into what I've just described with using sport to build a relationship, starting in custody, but then really long-term holistic mentoring support beyond release. So keep an eye out for Game Plan. We'll be talking a lot more about that in the coming months, but that's just a sneak peek into what we'll be doing. You'll notice there as well that it talks about ACEs. I mentioned it earlier, adverse childhood experiences. Anyone now that's up on the game, ahead of the game with criminal justice, is talking about adverse childhood experiences. The stats really don't lie. People who have experienced 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, and that could be anything from neglect, abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse in the home. People who experience 4 or more of these things as children in development are 15 times more likely to go to prison. They're 20 times more likely to be victims of violence. So we really have to start looking into what's the leading research that's coming out of academia, out of social work, what the leading schools are doing, and start to apply those lessons into the criminal justice system. And there's a lot of good people working within prisons who are trying to do that, but I think we all recognise that we need to see it more comprehensively. We've got a short video from Larry now. This is about 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to Louis. Larry, let me do it like this. Let me ask you some questions. What are you, how did we meet? How did we come to meet?
So through my journey, we came to meet actually at HMP Wormwood Scrubs. And at that time, I was in custody, and I just remember looking outside and just seeing that there was rugby taking place. And, you know, I just thought to myself, let me see what that's all about, which I did go into the course eventually. And it was amazing. I mean, being part of the program, I learned a lot, and it opened up my eyes. I mean, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Mike, because a lot of the things that happen now was watching you. And so I'm going to just say a small topic about what happened with you, Mike. So the thing that actually opened up my eyes was in 2016, there was the first terrorist attack. And I saw you on the news, Mike, and then I saw you in the gym. And I asked you, how come you're here? And you was like, because you guys still need support. And, you know, with that touched my heart, you know, because I've just seen you on the news. I've just seen what you've just had to go through and witness. And to have you still come into prison and still support us, you know, like that just opened up my eyes to, that made me just have a lot more empathy, a lot more, you know, it opened up my heart a bit more to what's going on around me, to the people. So I put my everything I could into the program. I finished it, and I actually carried on my journey. And eventually I went on to open prison, where I done work with St. Giles Trust, carrying on working with the kids. And once I got released, I actually went for the role, and I'm currently an outreach custody suite caseworker.
Yeah.
And I work with under 25s. And it's been amazing, you know, and a lot of that began just from that journey of meeting yourselves and just opening up, you know, because you came in with a great team. So it's not like there was no support there, you know. We was working in the classroom, and it was amazing, you know, even to see guys on the program that had problems, but just through seeing how you was treating us and what happened, nobody didn't even disrespect and started fighting. So it all went beautiful. There was a truce made in between prisoners because of everything. So,
and that's you highlight something really important there. You highlight respect. So I know that this is mentioned in the video, so you won't mind me mentioning it, but you said, how long did you serve in prison?
So I've served 13 years. I went to prison in 2006, September, and I got released in 2019, September.
Yeah. And you actually had an IPP sentence, didn't you, Larry?
Yeah, I received the IPP sentence of 43 months, which is 3 years and 7 months.
Yeah. And I think that's significant in the fact that you mention respect, because actually, like, there's a lot of awareness now on IPP sentences and how difficult they are for people to, in a prison environment, to prove that they're ready for release. But you mentioning respect, do you feel like that factored into how you were able to grow and develop going forward?
I mean, 100%. You know, at the end of the day, with my journey, you know, having that kind of not listening to authority and risk-taking behavior, breaking boundaries. So it just, you know, it just stopped all of that and made me more made me more versatile. It made me, you know, like open up my pores. It made me deal with people like how I would expect to be dealt with, you know, and talking to the officers as well, and treating the officers not like just officers, but also as human beings.
Yeah. And last question, Larry, and thank you for being patient with us because we've chucked you on the spot. But you are definitely the man to go to in a crisis, I think, because you've always got something interesting to say. You're now working for St Giles Trust, which I think is fantastic as well, and they're a brilliant charity that some people may have heard of. Do you think there's value in being able to work with different charities along your journey?
I think there's values to working with or working together, you know, because it's why I say working as a wholesome, because we actually have got a very big problem with a lot of the younger generation at the minute, as everyone could be aware. You know, it's not like how it was 12, 13, 15, 16 years ago. So I believe that we should all just, you know, like expand to the highest limit to, I mean,
I think I'm kind of throwing a leading question at you, because what I think one of the things that sector needs in particular is different charities and organizations to work far more together and far more collaboratively, as opposed to seeing each other as competitors. And I think what you're doing with St Giles now is fantastic, and we're really proud to have seen your journey and continue to see your journey. If anyone's got any questions for both Larry, Louis, or I, at the end, we've got a section for questions. So, Larry, if you're sticking around, there might be some questions for you later, mate. But thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna go over to Louis, who right now, by the virtue of technology, is live from the room next door to me.
So we're actually in the same building, which is the Black Prince Trust, where we base a lot of our London work in. So as you've got the grasp of, my name's Louis, so I'm one of the quite recent trustees at 3Pillars. I've been asked to give a bit of a background about myself. So I'm 27 years old, grew up in Peckham, South London, so I've lived there my whole life, basically, and very much been heavily involved in sport. My main sport was basketball growing up, but naturally I went to a sports college, so I got involved in every sport under the sun. I think a lot of people in here are probably familiar with Peckham or have heard about Peckham. There's significant amounts of youth or street gang crime that occurred back when I was young until to this very day. So what that did for me was it allowed me to develop a network of friends who, some have gone on to become professionals like myself, and some may have made a few mistakes down the road and had quite a few encounters with the criminal justice system. Obviously, as I've progressed as a person, I went on to university, and then later on launched my own business called Let's Get Active, which was a sports organization pretty much aimed at working with young people in the community, very similar to 3Pillars, really, using sport as that hook to encourage positive change and kind of signpost them to other services, educational services and other support services. Somehow, God knows how, I fell into doing a PhD. I wasn't the most academic person at school, but I'd been almost headhunted for this PhD because it was very much, as Mike mentioned, centered around youth street gangs and how they develop, and if sport or whether sport can actually combat these issues. So that's where I'm currently at with the PhD. I'm actually in my third year. And what I'm going to be speaking to you guys about today is the impact of COVID on the criminal justice system, which actually ties into my most recent study, because we're looking at the impact of COVID on youth as a whole, particularly in the South London area. I think the next point is to kind of give a bit of depth as to why I became a trustee. So as mentioned, you know, I went on to university, I've graduated, I'm doing relatively well for myself, but throughout my life and to this very day, because of the friendship networks and the social networks I developed, I'm still very much impacted by the criminal justice system. I've got very close friends and family members that have been very much a part of the criminal justice system. Prison visits aren't a new experience to me. It's something I've done in a variety of times. And I felt like working with a charity that gets direct access to people that are impacted by the criminal justice system was something that was just a no-brainer. Not to mention, me and Mike actually had quite a good relationship, so it was just something that naturally kind of fell into place. And then when I interviewed, I managed to answer all the right questions, and here I am. In terms of me talking, I want to keep it quite minimal. So I've introduced myself, I've given you guys a bit of a background. But what I'd love to do now is if we can utilize the chat, and if you guys, we've got an array of different people in the audience, if you could tell me the 3 main challenges that the people you work with have gone through during COVID. So we can maybe look at mental health issues, physical issues, and even wider social issues. But if you could give me 3 using the chat function, we'll start discussing around these topics. So we've got isolation that's popped up, which is great. I'm going to give a few myself. Okay. So we've got a lot around emotional or lack of emotional support and mental health, well-being, sorry. We're getting a few about social. Any more about social, guys? So I put lack of opportunities, whether it be work or in an education setting, which has significantly impacted young people. But any others? Okay, so we've got someone that works with disabilities and they often get missed off lists, which is quite interesting. Closure of support services. Someone's put online beef exploitation, which is quite an interesting topic. Okay, so, and guys, keep firing away as I talk. Don't feel like because I've started talking, you have to stop. But from what I can read is we're getting quite a lot of similar issues. A lot of, you know, even though I think everyone kind of works in different disciplines and in different places, we all kind of have that agreement that neglect is definitely one, isolation is definitely a key thing. Lack of support, whether that be in the form of emotional, physical, or social support. And then obviously there's that family breakdown. I think a lot of people haven't seen certain relatives for almost 12 months now. So that can obviously take its toll. So now we look at the impact that we as an organization, 3Pillars, have on these problems. So I can give you a case study. We had 2 gentlemen last summer who were released from Felton prison. Now, upon release, usually it would be, I want to say, a smoother process in terms of being able to signpost them to education opportunities, to work opportunities. Mike does a great job of liaising with local organizations to find them actual work. But as you can imagine, in May, that I think it was around the May, June time, there wasn't much going on. And not only did they not have access to services that, you know, they really have a right to access, they also didn't have that opportunity to climb that ladder. Because what we're finding is a lot of the men and women that we work with, once they come out, they're just ready to hit the ground running. And what COVID has done is it's kind of prevented that, which then has a bleeding effect on their decision making. Because we're finding that a lot of these men and women that we work with are ultimately placed in really difficult positions because they cannot make money in any way, shape or form, or their opportunities to do so are limited. Their education opportunities or opportunities to better themselves, whether it be through vocational training courses, are also limited. And also that emotional support wasn't there. So often we were that main point of contact. We were that main, you know, our mentors do an amazing job of really like digging deep with our apprentices. But in essence, and not to, you know, make it sound like we're the savior of the world, but for a lot of the young men we work with in particular, if they didn't have us to talk to, you know, it would be extremely difficult for them. And dare I say it, they may end up reoffending at some point. So something that I kind of want to get, you know, everyone here thinking and talking about is how can this change? So, you know, I'm not going to say we're going to go through another COVID-19 again, but in the case that, you know, for some reason we're all locked in our houses and we can't necessarily do face-to-face work, you know, how are we as organizations going to combat this? So maybe in the chat, we use the chat function again. You know, the question is, how can you as an organization or an individual prepare yourself to almost make your approach pandemic proof? Obviously, we've got tools like Zoom, but with what you do, whatever it is you do, how can you make sure that you're able to support your demographic and even people that we work with in the criminal justice system better during this difficult period? So chat function, I'm going to put a little message myself. But yeah, start firing away. So we've got mentors or appropriate adults and youth services are very important. Perfect. Okay, so someone's touched on a really good one about working with PRUs and youth offenders, which I'm in heavy agreement with, because that early intervention stuff is vital. Listen to what people want, that's always a great one. Social media. My only question to social media is, what if someone's not very social media heavy or very social media savvy? Yeah, so someone made that point, not everyone is digitally connected. And if you don't have an answer, so PRUs are pupil referral units. So that's where children that have been kicked out of mainstream education would get sent. And there are quite a few studies to suggest that this is almost like a gateway to youth offenders. So there's a significant proportion of young people that once they get sent to PRUs, it's almost like, you know, they're going to end up in youth offenders within that next 6 to 12 months. So services still need to run at some level, which I agree. So I suppose rounding back, so we're coming up with some really great solutions. And I suppose now I kind of want to round back to the importance of this and why am I having this conversation with you guys, or why am I speaking to you about this? So, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that, you know, there's the physical issues that it causes. So obviously being isolated, you know, you may put on weight, you may start to not feel great about yourself, you're cooped up in the house. And ultimately, a lot of the young men and women we work with, we're mirroring the situation that they've just been released from. So there's that aspect. Then there's the mental aspect, which is very well documented: anxiety, depression, and the array of other issues that come with that. But when we get to the social aspect, I think a lot of people really downplay the importance of this one, because yes, there's this, you know, across the different types of work I do, there's this common notion that people feel that young or men and women that have been to prison don't deserve support services. They don't deserve X, Y, and Z. Now, my counter argument to that is, you know, these people that serve their prison sentences, they then join us in the community. They're not heading off into secret societies or gated communities. They become amongst us. So, you know, if we're not focusing on making sure that everyone that leaves those gates has their best foot forward and has the most support to effectively be rehabilitated, then we almost put ourselves at a disadvantage, because these are going to be our neighbors, potential youth coaches, youth sports coaches for our kids, potential shopkeepers. You know, you never know what role or what career path someone's going to go into. So I think that will always be the driving point in terms of not just the work that we do, but emphasizing, you know, really rehabilitating people that have ultimately just made mistakes. And I think the narrative also needs to change around people that have had, you know, have been a part of the criminal justice system at a younger age. And like Larry, beautiful story, has completely turned his life around. And the man that Larry now is probably the polar opposite to who he was when he first went into prison. And it, you know, Larry, thank you for speaking. Like, you know, your story really inspired me, and it's great to, you know, Larry's not the only one, and I think that is what we need to focus on, and really honing in on that social aspect of supporting people, particularly during this difficult time in COVID, is something that's really gonna make that difference. In terms of me talking, like I said, I'm not going to talk everyone's head off. So that's my kind of piece done. And I suppose Mike's going to also mention as well. We're just going to open it up. So there's questions for myself, Mike, or Larry, if he's happy to do so. But thanks for listening to my piece, guys. And please fire away if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Lewis. That's really great, and some really interesting insights there, and looking at a different way as well. I think there, just to everyone on the call, there's lots of different experiences within the sector. There's some people who are students. We've got people who have been governors, prison governors for years. We've got people who've maybe been in prison, and people who are coming completely from outside. So if anyone has any questions, please do pop them in the chat box. I think Jen had said something earlier. Lewis, you've got so many comments in, I can't even follow the questions.
Sorry about that, Mike.
Too much, almost too much engagement. So it's a really interesting question from Maeve. I'm going to name check you for Children Need. Just makes us sound better, Maeve. So Maeve is our fantastic small grants manager from Children Need, and she's asked what an IPP is. Larry, do you want to jump in on this, or shall I answer it? Someone's muted you, I think. There we go.
Hi,
do you want to answer, or shall I answer?
Yeah, I could answer that. So my IPP sentence is imprisonment for public protection. That was brought out. It was brought out mainly to incarcerate rapists and high-profile criminals. But at that time, as judges wasn't aware, they just started dishing it out to everyone going through the judicial system. So a lot of us my age ended up getting it, as we were the ones that was always in and out of court. So yeah, and it got abolished in 2012, December, as it was claimed that it was inhumane. So.
And there's, thank you for that, Larry. That's really, you're absolutely spot on. I think like when they first created the IPP, they thought a couple of hundred people would get it. But I think by the end there were, you know, it was kind of in the tens of thousands have been awarded IPPs. And there's still people in prison at the moment who have IPP sentences. If anyone's interested in that IPP, there's a couple of campaigns trying to abolish IPPs. And I think really the significant thing about an IPP is for somebody who's in custody, like mentally, actually it's really difficult to get over an indeterminate sentence. So indeterminate with an IPP, they fixed a minimum date, but then you always have to go back to probation and the parole board and prove that you were ready for release. Now, to anyone that's been in custody, prison is a completely unnatural environment. So actually it's very difficult to prove really that you're ready for release through your behavior in prison. And there are some stories of people sentenced for as little as 9 months with an IPP who have gone on to serve 10 years plus because psychologically and mentally they've just not been able to cope with prison. But Larry, you are very much a good news story who's come out of the back of it. And as Lewis said, it's fantastic what you're doing now. Jen, are you tracking the questions?
Yes, I've got a couple here. One from Hannah that was asking, is digital access an issue for the young people you're working with outside, i.e. having a smartphone or laptop?
Lewis, you must have done a lot of stuff on digital access.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. And yes, it is. It's a big issue. So what we found upon, well, this time last year, was a vast majority of the young people we work with did not have access to a smartphone, tablet, or laptop. So what it meant for me as an organization, or me as a youth practitioner, was to get in touch with any supporting organizations that were willing to donate laptops, donate tablets, donate iPhones, etc. And I suppose the key undertone for that is collaborative work. So the main thing I take pride in is knowing a lot of people in my community and the communities I work in, to make sure that I've got that whole offer. And it's not just sport I'm bringing you. If you don't want to do sport, I can signpost you somewhere else. So yeah, you know, having access to any kind of digital device was very difficult, but it's something that can easily be got around if you just know the right people and you're willing to partner up in certain places. And since last year's lockdown, definitely down in London, they've introduced a lot of schemes where young people can apply for bursaries or apply for like with Google, they can apply for, or let them know their financial status and receive a free Chromebook. So there's loads of initiatives to support young people in that sense.
I think for anyone in the charity sector, like there shouldn't be people suffering from digital divide. Because of the economic position we're out, the government will be funding lots of initiatives, and there are a lot of things coming from local authorities as well, that if you have encounter people coming up against digital divide, you know, there are solutions for them. And also the cost of tablets nowadays from Amazon, for example, it's under £100. So it's, to get good technology is far more accessible than it was before. Larry, just back to you. The question actually asked what made you want to work with 3Pillars after prison, but you actually didn't come straight to us after prison, did you? Which I think is a great thing. You went to St Giles Trust. Do you want to ask why did you go to St Giles Trust and not straight to us? I mean, I want to know personally.
So initially, I went to open prison, and it's when I was in open prison that I started doing voluntary work with St Giles Trust. And as I started doing voluntary work, and you know, it's, you know, like I was helping people like that genuinely they don't have food. They genuinely didn't have money to buy some food for the week and things like that. So I was helping the homeless in the community, and it's that opened up my eyes a lot more, as there's a lot more people that need help. As before, it was always me, and everything's about me. But now that I look out, I see that there's a lot of other people that needed help as well. So, you know, I just started getting involved with a lot of the work with St. Giles, ended up doing some qualifications, and then I got released, and eventually built the courage to put in my CV, which I went for my job interview, and yeah, and when it was a job role to do with the young people, helping the under 25s who's involved and entrenched in criminal lifestyle, gangs, you know, and that's about up my street.
And the rest is kind of history, so to speak.
Yeah, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said, I think, Larry, for that feeling of giving back to your community. Like, I think that has a massive improving effect on like your personal well-being, not just the people you're helping.
Yeah, I mean, when I was incarcerated and there was young people around me, I started realizing that with a lot of the young people, I did used to take them to like libraries and things like that and educate them a bit more to prepare them for when they got out. So now that I'm actually released myself, you know, this is a passion for me. You know, like it's not a job for me. You know, it's not a burden on me. It's all just a passion. Yeah. Because I see that the young people are misunderstood, you know, so, you know, they've got a lot to give. And I just feel that they haven't been given that chance that they deserve as young people, you know, but this is why I love the work that.
Yeah. And Larry, you're helping them to get that now. And there's a saying, they say, if you do something you love, you never work a day again in your life. So I think that's a good example of that. We won't take any more questions, but I'll just try and fire through some of these really quickly. So someone's asked about rates of reoffending through COVID. Well, so firstly, as a charity, we don't like to talk about reoffending rates because effectively most organisations manipulate them. Reoffending rates are not a particularly good measure of the effectiveness of prisons, of an intervention, because it encourages organisations to cherry pick who they're working with. And actually, there's some very clear statistics that show certain types of offending have a low reoffending rate. Certain age groups, certain family situations have a low reoffending rate. And actually what we need to be doing is to reaching into groups that have high reoffending rates and carry with them additional risk, but also that's where the greatest reward lies. And just to answer the question specifically, we won't know how COVID has affected reoffending rates until 18 months kind of after the end of COVID. The reason we talk about reoffending within 1 year is because you would have to allow the court process, police and court process to occur. So the data that would exist would be about prison recalls and whether or not they've been higher or not, and we'd have to ask the Home Office for that. But I think it's a really interesting question, definitely one to look at in the next year. There was also a question about too many charities competing for resources. I think the main problem with the criminal justice system is that the money isn't used effectively, certainly. And you'll have seen in the press this week, there seems to be a slide towards increasingly longer and longer sentences. I think actually we should be putting pressure on government to say that we know that this isn't effective. We know that's not effective because of what we've seen in the United States, where they've gone for exponential sentencing. And actually it's only led to a massive proportion of their population becoming imprisoned with no way of kind of rehabilitating. So longer and longer sentences don't solve the problems in the criminal justice system. Actually, what we need is to pay the staff in the criminal justice system more money. We need to have more therapeutic and holistic approaches. We need to provide better training, longer training for prison officers, not be shortening the training. And charities, I think, definitely have a part to play in that, in collaborating with prison or rehabilitation officers. And I think, yes, there is a lot of competition for limited resources in prison service and the sector. But I think with more of a shift towards a rehabilitative approach and less people getting long sentences, then we'd probably be able to move some of the resources around to places where they work more effectively. Louis, do you want to just quickly say really quickly what you think a holistic approach is in like 3Pillars eyes?
Yeah, so I touched on it earlier. So a holistic approach for me is just considering someone's mental, physical and social health and understanding where you fit in that. So Mike touched on it earlier, sport isn't the answer to everything. And sport, we're not getting guys in or women in and trying to encourage them to be athletes or sports coaches. Effectively, sport is the muse. That's what you use for more for your psychological and mental well-being. And then once we've got you in, we can then signpost you to things that will take care of your social health, support services, access to improving your quality of life, education, employment, etc. And then the physical, that kind of takes care of itself. You making that journey, or these people that are apprentices that make that journey, that gets them out of their comfort zone and it gets them in a space where they're not being judged. And obviously they're going to improve their physical health through just partaking in sport. So that's my idea of holistic approach. And then also the really important part, like we keep touching on, is interacting, engaging and collaborating with other organizations. Knowing what you can do, accepting that, and also knowing what you can't, and not being afraid to ask for help, and not looking at the next organization as competition and more so as teammates.
Yeah, I think that's really it. Like a holistic approach looks at everything in someone's life: housing, employment, friendships, community, health and well-being, mental health. That's what holistic means. And with a focused mentoring approach and an individualistic response, you're able to be more holistic. I think we're going to go on to the next slide. And what we'll do with these questions is we'll stay on at the end and we'll answer for anybody that wants these questions answered. Thank you for the engagement. The last thing here is, now we've had some fantastic interns working with us from Nottingham University for the past 2-3 months, and we've got a virtual 3 Peaks challenge happening at the end of the month. Now anyone can take part. We are asking people to kind of seek sponsorship if they can, but basically we're doing the distance of the 3 Peaks challenge, which is the 3 highest peaks in the UK, but we're doing it over 3 days at the end of the month. If you go onto the front page of our website, you can sign up and we'll put you in a Strava group. You can either do it as a team or an individual. Yes, we're doing it for fundraising, but also it's a fantastic way during the current lockdown to engage and being involved in something. We really just love to reach out to new people who previously haven't been involved in activities with us, and just use this as a way to engage. The other thing, if there's anyone here from people in custody, if it's possible to try and do the 37K over 3 days from inside a prison or a YOI, that would be fantastic as well. We're really open to anyone that wants to get in touch and try and do this in any creative ways. Jen, have I said enough on that? Do you want to add anything more?
Right, that's perfect. As you said, it would be really good for people at the end of lockdown to get out with whether that's friends, family, or their peers, and take part in this. So if you've just been touched by work we're doing, we've had to cancel a lot of events over the last year, so this is part of our way of supporting the work that we do, and we'd really love for you to be involved as well.
Thanks very much, Jen. We're gonna stay on try and clear up a couple of these questions. There's some great kind of debates going on. Thank you, Louis, and Larry as well. Larry, we've absolutely put you on spot, so might have to get you a place on Sky News as a commentator because you dealt with it like a pro. But thank you so much to Louis and Larry. And if anyone else wants to just stay and we'll answer these questions, then please do that. On the slide, please do follow us on social media and do have a look at the website for the 3 Peaks Challenge. But thanks very much. Cool. Louis, should we just quickly answer some of these questions, just if anyone wants to stay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Here's a good one for you. How does 3 Pillars engage with other local organisations and expertise?
Well, firstly, we're our London division, quote unquote. We're based in a community hub in the heart of North Lambeth. Within that community hub, there are, lost count, Mike, at least 5 or 6 other key organisations across Lambeth that operate within the same office. So naturally, you're brushing shoulders with people that work in a variety of different services. Not only that, we're very open to inviting staff members and practitioners from other organisations down to our sessions and, showing them and teaching them about the work we do. We don't have this blanket approach where we're covering our answers and we're hiding it from the rest of the sector. We're very open with what we do. We're welcoming to anyone that wants to come and have a look. And we're always willing to share ideas. And that's actually how me and Mike developed a relationship. So
I think that's a good answer. We're very open-minded. I think as long as your organisation is reliable and don't let down our participants, we're very open to work with people. I think that's my main kind of quality mark, like being reliable as an organisation, because the young people we work with have been let down throughout their lives, and we as either charities or statutory organisations, we can't afford to let them down as well. So that's our main benchmark. Someone's asked about why sport and getting active is such a good intervention and helps prevent reoffending. I guess links to this vehicle, but Louis, you'll definitely have some thoughts on this. Why do you think sport's so effective?
I think it's very hard to answer this question because I'd always treat it with a case-by-case basis. So there's a variety of different reasons. You've got the reason that if you introduce someone, and I'm talking about at an early intervention stage, so if you get a young child, say 10 or 11, that's introduced to sport, you know, sport becomes their life. That was very much my story. So I was introduced to basketball, and there wasn't a day you couldn't tell me I wasn't going to the NBA. Like, that was, I had my head screwed on. I was growing up in the middle of Peckham, gang was going on, drug dealing, it didn't matter. I was a basketball player. So that's that aspect of it. But then there's also the aspect of the young person or even the adult that is able to develop a more positive social network through sport. You know, down at the Black Prince Trust here, we're associated with Power League. And if, you know, we've got young men from the local community who once again have made a few mistakes along the way, brushing shoulders and playing five-a-side with high-end corporates and solicitors and lawyers and doctors. And what that does is it exposes them firsthand to people from different walks of life. And I think that's the other side of sport and the other power of sport that is quite unspoken of. You know, if you're going through a rough time, you might end up brushing shoulders with someone who's had a similar journey to you, but a completely different outcome. And that is your common ground, and that might be what pulls you away from, you know, making that mistake or continuing to make mistakes.
I think that's a really good. So there's another question about children being excluded from pupil referral units, but you've also mentioned it there in relation to sport. Pro-social networks is just such an important factor. If you can get a young person into a pro-social network, that might be the thing that helps their behaviour and gets it back on track. Just having those additional rules who can add that extra guidance, I think is really valuable, both for teenagers who potentially are struggling at school, but also the young men we work with. There was another point about just campaigning, and also we don't really campaign. We campaign through what we do. Like our intention is to develop the best intervention program in the criminal justice sector, and we believe that by doing that we can demonstrate what needs to happen more broadly. So that's our form of campaigning. I think in terms of prison length, sentence lengths, yes, it is down to politicians, but we all have a vote and we all have ability to influence that. So when people are advocating for longer and longer sentences, just ask everybody to kind of stick their head up and just say, is this actually what's right for the country? And is this what works? Because all the evidence says, no, it's not. Cool. I think we're pretty much there. Thank you everyone for joining. Louis, thanks again. Larry's.
Mike, I think Jacqueline had a really good question, which I wanted to help her out on. So she's asked about currently existing sports organizations and how do you kind of get in touch with them. And my ethos is just transparency. So, you know, head down to the session, don't be a creep about it and try and like stand to the side and observe, you know, introduce yourself to the main coaches or who you've identified as the main coaches. Make them very aware of your intentions, what you want to do as an organization, as an individual, and then go from there. Not everyone's going to want you to collaborate with them. Some people are going to think that they're fine on their own, and that's just part of, I suppose that's part of the sector. But like, just being transparent and honest, they may not want to collaborate at that particular time, but in 5, 6 months, maybe even a year later, you know, they may be more open to planning and you know, working alongside you, because they need that other organization to lean on, or that they need that other level of expertise. So yeah,
I think that's a really good point. I think building a relationship, and sometimes organizations are scared of collaborating with others. They think they're trying to move in their territory. I think just building trust is the most important thing, and sometimes trust just takes time.
Yeah.
Well, look, we'll call it there. Thank you, Louis, and Larry. Thank you so much for stepping in. You had your dress rehearsal recording that video yesterday, and not quite worked, but brilliant job. And thank you so much for joining us. And Jen and Tom, thank you for running and organising this, along with Audrey. Cool. Goodbye, everyone. Tom,
Thank you, everyone.
do you want to make me host again?
Take care, guys.